She is the daughter of a wealthy gentleman who is dead set on crossing class boundaries. A noble lady title promised verbally by a man made her willingly become his secret lover, but the man mercilessly cast her aside after achieving his goal. She was neither angry nor disheartened. Instead, she turned her attention to the man's elder brother.
I have to marry a virgin. I can't stand criticism.
For the money, I mean.
Who she married never mattered to her. What was important was the other person's title. Faced with Karen's sky-high dowry of a 6,000-acre ranch, the baron who had squandered his family fortune happily agreed. Driven by her longing for the title of baroness, Karen set off alone to Africa for the wedding, carrying a carriage full of crystal and porcelain, and this was to be the turning point in her life. After days of traveling, she finally reached the destination, but her fiancé only sent a butler to meet her, coupled with the clothing and skin colors of the surrounding ethnic minorities. This made Karen increasingly feel nervous and uneasy. With great difficulty, she arrived at the club where her husband was staying, but her compatriots of the same skin color gave her unfriendly looks instead. Karen came to the hall feeling a bit depressed, and just then, her fiancé hurried over. He apologized insincerely, saying he hadn't prepared a wedding ring and that the wedding would be held in an hour. The wedding was as hasty as a child's play, and the officiant even forgot the bride's name. What Karen needed was not marriage but a noble status, which could bring her social position and confidence. Even when she saw her husband chatting up other ladies at the wedding, she didn't care much. But when she arrived at the villa she had bought in the countryside and learned that her husband, who had no planting experience, had planned the ranch as a coffee plantation, she rarely showed anger. Karen regarded this marriage as a business deal, but her husband was clearly not a qualified partner. The next day, he led a group of people to go hunting and left a message saying he would come back when it rained.
Is it going to rain today?
Can be many days before the rains.
Faced with such an irresponsible partner, Karen had to take care of the coffee plantation alone. First, she reasonably planned the planting area according to the harvest time, and then she found the local indigenous chief to hire workers. She also tried to civilize the servants with European civilization, such as making them wear white gloves. Sometimes at night, she would feel a touch of loneliness, until one day, Karen chose to pick up a shotgun and go out alone to relax. For the first time, she directly felt the vitality and richness of this land, but at the same time, beauty and danger coexisted here. The horse suddenly broke free from the reins and ran away, and a low growl came from behind. A lioness with blood still on her mouth slowly approached.
Let's give her a moment.
Oh my God, shoot her!
Karen turned her head and found that the man was someone she had met briefly before. On her way here, the train had stopped midway because of him. Seeing him put 2 ivory tusks on the train, Karen became even more curious, so she greeted him as a baroness. Karen invited Dennis and his friend to her home as guests and found that she got along surprisingly well with him. They both loved poetry and had a lively conversation about the rhymes of poems. As the son of an earl, Dennis had exiled himself to Africa. He had seen the sky and earth, the valleys, and all kinds of people. He exuded a romantic and free-spirited temperament like a poet. In Dennis' eyes, Karen was no longer the rigid noble lady image she had at their first meeting. She had an extremely rich spiritual world. With just a simple story prelude, she could create a magnificent chapter, making people feel as if they were in it.
Have you been to those places?
I have been a mental traveler.
They saw in each other another possibility they couldn't become. This spiritual resonance made Karen both addicted and afraid. Holding the pen Dennis sent, her lonely soul swayed violently between moral shackles and the desire for freedom. Karen was afraid that this feeling would disrupt her original life order. So when the rainy day came, she stopped her husband whose hunting had been forced to end. She boldly expressed her love in the rain, trying to use a normal marriage to fight against her inner turmoil and also wanting to complete the family through having children. However, not long after, with the outbreak of the war to seize colonies, her husband insisted on joining despite her persuasion. Karen could only continue to endure the loneliness and manage the farm, and this hot land was also slowly melting her. she would put aside her noble lady airs to greet those warm-hearted old women. She also began to kneel on the ground herself to plant seedlings in the astonished eyes of the indigenous people and would bandage the wounds of those who refused treatment after being injured. The children of the tribe would gather at the door of the villa to watch the novel items she had brought, and she would just smile knowingly at the noise outside. Until one day, her husband sent a message. He asked Karen to take stock of some supplies and have them sent to Nazhan Lake on the front line, and to prevent the indigenous people from causing trouble while the men were away. These women and children were to be temporarily sent back to the city. Karen didn't want her value to be denied like this, so she resolutely chose to lead the team to deliver the supplies herself. However, the road was more difficult to travel than she had imagined, and the primitive landscape lacked clear signs, so the convoy took the wrong direction. During the evening rest, Karen felt a bit guilty, and the butler comforted her in a timely manner, saying that God would give guidance. Unexpectedly, the next day, while everyone was still asleep, they were surrounded and charged by a group of horse riders. Karen was a bit flustered, and unexpectedly, the leader of the horse team was Dennis, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. He and his friend were also going to the battlefield, and when the friend heard that Karen was also going to the front line, he strongly advised her to turn back immediately. That was no place for a woman. Dennis respected and appreciated Karen's decision, but unfortunately, the two were not going the same way. He gave a compass to Karen and then said goodbye again. Karen also adjusted her direction and set off again. However, no sooner had one problem been solved than another arose. At night, two lions attacked the oxen carrying supplies. In the panic, Karen had no time to look for a gun. She took a whip and struggled to push aside the thorns, then went forward regardless of the danger to drive away the lions. Karen's bold and fearless appearance deeply shocked and admired the indigenous people who came behind. Seeing the number of people increasing, the lions finally ran away. After seeing that the oxen were not seriously injured, Karen let out a long sigh of relief. When the person in charge of the front line saw the travel-stained supply team, his face was full of disbelief. The gathered people all subconsciously made way. Karen on horseback was completely unlike the image of a baroness, but she made the entire crowd fall into dead silence. Their eyes were full of shock and astonishment. Her husband showed a little more approval, and Karen always remained calm and composed. In the tent, her husband refused Karen's request for him to go home. Karen also admitted that she couldn't escape worldly desires. She began to long for a complete marriage and said she would wait for him to return from the front at the farm. The two who had reached an agreement both followed their current physical desires, but after returning, what Karen waited for first was not her husband but the virus he had brought her by having affairs with other women. At that time, this disease could only be treated by using arsenic to fight poison with poison, and the cure rate was only 50%. Karen had to choose to return to her hometown in Denmark for recuperation. Her husband, who had milder symptoms, apologized to her and said he could go back with her to take care of her, but Karen only asked him to stay and take care of the farm. When leaving, she met Dennis again. He was still free and easy, but she didn't dare to admit that she was ill. After they agreed to create stories when they met next time, Karen set off on her journey to Denmark alone. There, arsenic became her ally in the fight against the powerful enemy. During this period, she missed that land extremely, missing its brilliant and colorful colors and warm-hearted and simple residents. Her tenacity finally helped her overcome the disease, but at the same time, she lost her ability to have children. When people saw Karen return here, they suddenly swarmed up. A child trotted forward and presented an owl as a welcome gift. A tribal boy also showed the wound she had bandaged before she left. During her absence, the butler also insisted on keeping the room spotless. To repay the enthusiasm of these indigenous people, Karen decided to save them in a European way, but the news that she was going to open a school locally was met with cold sarcasm at the New Year's dance. Just as a conflict was about to break out, Dennis suddenly appeared and pulled her away. They moved to the music, but unexpectedly, Dennis also didn't agree with her rescue plan. He believed that these indigenous people had their own way of life, and what they needed was respect, not transformation by imposing one's will. They had differences in their ideas, but they were attracted to each other in the midst of these differences. On the way back, Karen found a woman's underwear in her husband's car. She no longer had expectations for this marriage, so she took the initiative to propose a separation. Her husband also felt guilty and agreed to it. In the days that followed, Karen threw herself entirely into the management of the farm. She bustled about in the lush green fields, drying the beans with her own hands and feeling the joy of the harvest. The prepared teaching plan also started smoothly. She worked late day after day until one day, Dennis came to find her. He had found a job guiding hunting trips notes and invited Karen to be his first client. Following him, Karen began a brand new and fantastical journey. Both of them shared a curiosity about the world. He took her to hide aside and play a gramophone, watching monkeys approach traps drawn by Mozart's music. In the afternoons, he would rinse her long hair with clear water. The sunlight filtered through the tree shadows, turning the unspoken feelings between them into tangible, flowing warmth. During the journey, they were also spotted by a lioness. Unlike before, Karen did not hesitate but seized the opportunity to fire a decisive shot. At night, they lit a campfire deep in the grassland, creating a grand and romantic dinner even in the most barren wilderness. Karen admitted that she had contracted the virus and could no longer have children, but Dennis never cared about such things. That night, they confirmed their feelings for each other. They went on to spend a wonderful time together. Dennis would describe the sights and stories from his travels, and Karen would respond with enthusiasm. Once, he drove a plane he had just learned to pilot and took her to see the entire African continent. Karen truly witnessed the greatness of this land. The green grasslands were like frozen waves, the migrating animals like flowing poems, and the winding rivers like the earth's blood vessels. When thousands of red-winged birds rose in flocks from the sunlit lake, they held hands in the sky, rejoicing that they could share this breathtaking scene with each other. Dennis' free-spirited soul had initially deeply attracted Karen, but over time, this attraction slowly turned into torture for her. She did not know when he would appear or when he would leave, so she could only manage her business and take care of everything around her during the endless days of waiting. Until one day, her husband came to find her. He had found a wealthier partner and wanted to end their marriage. Karen feared that she would lose both the marriage and fail to hold on to Dennis' unruly heart, ending up with nothing. So when Dennis returned from another trip, Karen began to seriously discuss the future with him, but he believed that marriage itself was meaningless. Dennis had extraordinary values. He did not impose his will on anyone, nor was he willing to cater to others' will and lose his freedom, even if the price was loneliness or silent withering. One had an unyielding obsession with nonconformity, while the other longed for the defined security of marriage. Thus, they began to quarrel again and again.
But I don't need you.
You don't need me. If I die, will you die? You don't need me. You confuse. You mix up need with want. You always have.
My God, in the world that you would make, there would be no love at all.
Well, the best kind. The kind we wouldn't have to prove.
I have learned a thing that you haven't. There are some things worth having, but they come at a price, and I want to be one of them.
This relationship ultimately and inevitably ended in a breakup. With the arrival of another harvest season, Karen's longing for Dennis gradually subsided. She watched the price of coffee drop again and again, saw the pond she had planned washed away by heavy rain, and watched as the chief take away the children who had been studying. She slowly lost much, but also saw through much. One day, a sudden fire burned to ashes the fruits of her years of hard work. Her face was reddened by the flames, but there was no disappointment or frustration. Instead, she let out a long sigh. The fire destroyed everything she had, but it took away her obsession with material possession. After going bankrupt, Karen's land would be reclaimed by the government. When friends heard the news and came to comfort her, her reaction was unexpected. Karen sold her remaining possessions and prepared to return to Denmark. Although she had lost everything materially, her sense of responsibility for this land had not faded. Before leaving, she rushed around everywhere to find a new settlement for the indigenous people, but was rejected without exception. Karen did not give up. For the last time, she used her status as a baroness to make a request to the new governor at his inauguration ceremony. After being refused, she resolutely knelt down in full view of everyone. She had once wanted to reform this place with European civilization, but now she was kneeling to preserve a piece of land. However, the governor was unmoved and prepared to have her dragged away. To save face for Dennis, the governor said he would consider it. That night, Karen took off the gloves she had used to try to civilize the servants. Filled with apology, she gradually understood Dennis' words about being just a passerby and realized that true respect meant letting go of the arrogance of reform. And Karen's actions during the day to fight for settlement land for the indigenous people made Dennis, who rejected all constraints, understand that responsibility was part of freedom, so he proposed leaving with her. They agreed to depart together on Friday after Dennis finished handling his current affairs. The farewell was the opposite of before. Dennis promised to return on time, but Karen no longer asked about the return date. On the appointed day, She waited in vain for Dennis to show up. His plane crashed into the grassland he loved, completing the fated cycle of being born free, died free. At Dennis' funeral, Karen only took a handful of soil from in front of his tombstone. This man who lived for freedom finally rested in this land, becoming a martyr to freedom. On the day of her departure, a club member approached Karen. They wanted to raise a glass to him together. As Karen entered, the club members who had once refused her entry stood up one by one. These self-important men jointly raised their glasses to her. When she arrived, she had been rejected entry under the title of Baroness. When she left, without that title, she had earned respect through her own experiences. As she was about to board the train, Karen turned to look at the butler who had always called her Madam. She walked alone toward the train filled with memories, seemingly failed by the years, but in reality, she had touched everything and received the most solemn blessings of fate. When she entered Africa, she had everything in a social sense. She needed the title of Baroness and delicate material symbols to define herself. In the end, after losing everything, she earned respect through resilience, kindness, and responsibility. When she left, she took with her not material wealth, but a spiritual treasure trove sufficient to sustain the rest of her life. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.